For 30 years, Johnny Carson never lost his cool. Never. But I discovered 7 moments when that legendary control completely shattered. These weren't just awkward interviews. These were career-ending explosions that banned guests permanently from The Tonight Show. And what triggered them will shock you. Look, we all think we know Johnny Carson, but what you're about to discover is the real Johnny. The one who could go from charming to absolutely furious in the span of a heartbeat. These weren't just bad TV moments. These were the nights when America's most beloved host reached his limit and said, enough. So buckle up, because we're about to witness the moments when The Tonight Show went completely off the rails. The Great Monkey Meltdown. You've got to understand something about Johnny. He was obsessed with control. Every joke timed to perfection, every guest properly prepped. So when animal expert Joan Rivers promised him a perfectly tame monkey named Mo during rehearsal, Johnny felt confident. Mo had clung sweetly to Joan's sleeve, looking about as dangerous as a stuffed animal. But live television? That's a different beast entirely. The moment those cameras rolled, Mo spotted Johnny's silver hair gleaming under the studio lights. Maybe it reminded him of branches. Maybe he thought it was food. Who knows what goes through a monkey's mind? All I know is what happened next had Johnny questioning every life choice he'd ever made. Mo squealed like he'd found buried treasure and launched himself directly onto Johnny's head. Not near his head, not on his shoulder. Right on top of that perfectly styled hair that took 20 minutes to arrange. And then, oh boy, then came the warm stream. Well, I can't sit here. I can't sit and talk to people with an animal on my head, Johnny said, trying to maintain that famous composure while monkey urine dripped down his collar. Was he spitting? Was that saliva? The audience erupted. Johnny, ever the professional, quipped, "Folks, it's drizzling in here." But if you looked closely, and I mean really closely, you could see his hands shaking slightly as he reached for the towels. Backstage, during the commercial break, Johnny didn't just wash his hair. He practically scrubbed his scalp raw, muttering under his breath about dignified television and professional standards. The crew found him standing under the emergency shower in his dressing room, still wearing his suit jacket. When he returned, hair blow-dried and wearing a fresh shirt, he finished the show like nothing happened. That's pure Carson right there. But afterward? Oh, afterward, there was hell to pay. From now on, he told the producers, no primates above shoulder height, period. NBC actually installed a small warning sign near the studio door. Caution, Johnny's hair is not a branch. Mo was quietly retired from television appearances. Johnny never forgot. But if you think a monkey relieving itself on his head was embarrassing, the next animal encounter nearly cost Johnny his life. The panther that almost ended everything. Here's something most people don't know about Johnny. He was curious about everything, maybe too curious for his own good. During the commercial break, while trainer Ron Shannon was setting up the panther's cage, Johnny couldn't help himself. He wandered over for a closer look. "He's perfectly calm," Shannon whispered, probably regretting those words for the rest of his life. The panther's yellow eyes tracked Johnny's movement. Those weren't the eyes of a calm animal. Those were the eyes of a predator, calculating distance and opportunity. But Johnny, trusting the expert, leaned in for a better view. Suddenly, claws exploded against the steel bars. The roar that followed could probably be heard 3 blocks away. Johnny didn't just step back. He launched himself backward so hard he sprawled across the floor, tie askew, dignity somewhere under the guest chair. The audience gasped. The crew froze. For a moment, Studio 6B was dead silent, except for the panther's continued snarling. Johnny scrambled to his feet, straightened his tie, and delivered the line that saved the moment. "I just lost 9 lives." Classic Carson turned disaster into comedy. But here's what the audience didn't see. His hands were trembling as he shuffled his cards. This wasn't nervous energy. This was genuine shock. The man who'd survived 3 decades of live television had just come face to face with his own mortality. NBC, being NBC, thought the whole thing was ratings gold. They replayed that fall on blooper specials for years. Johnny hated every single airing. Each time it showed up, he'd fire off another memo. Get fresh tape. Retire that clip. The incident led to what became known as the Carson rule. No large predator within 3 feet of the desk. They actually measured and taped the distance on the studio floor. Months later, when a rival talk show aired the clip again, Johnny called NBC legal in a rare fury. "Next time, I'll feed their host to a cat." Have you ever had a moment where you realized just how quickly everything can go wrong? Drop a comment if you've had a close call like Johnny's, because what happened next was even more heart-stopping. But dangerous animals were nothing compared to the human tornado that was about to hit the Tonight Show stage. The Madonna encounter that nearly broke television. Madonna strutted onto that Tonight Show stage in 1994 like she owned the place. Black bustier, lace gloves, and a smile that screamed, "I'm about to turn your world upside down, Johnny." She didn't sit in the guest chair like a normal person. Oh no. Madonna perched herself right on the edge of Johnny's desk, forcing him to lean back like he was trying to escape. This wasn't an interview. It was an invasion. Her opening line? "Johnny, I chose you for my first because they say you're gentle." The audience went absolutely wild. Johnny's ears turned crimson beneath his makeup. You could practically see him calculating how much trouble he was in with the censors. But Madonna was just getting started. She picked up his cue cards and started fanning herself with them. She asked Johnny if he wore boxers. Then, and this is where things got really uncomfortable, she licked her index finger and tapped his coffee mug, whispering, "Too hot." Johnny chuckled, but his eyes were desperately scanning the control booth for help. The producers were already fielding frantic calls from standards and practices.
Now that is a nice...
Thank you.
What would you
What
call
am I
it?
wearing?
Yeah, if I went into a lingerie shop and I wanted to buy one of those for somebody. Come on, not for me, but for somebody.
They probably...
What would I call it?
It's called a bustier.
A bustier.
Yeah.
Madonna purred. When Johnny tried to steer the conversation toward her world tour, Madonna shot back, "Tour? Let's talk about your fantasy." The crowd erupted. Johnny went to commercial break faster than a man escaping a burning building. Off camera, he sighed to his producer, "Book me a nun tomorrow." Despite the tension, or maybe because of it, ratings spiked through the roof. NBC begged Johnny to have Madonna back. His response was classic Carson diplomacy. Once is memorable, twice is self-destruct. Think about it. Johnny Carson, who could handle politicians, drunks, and wild animals, was completely outmaneuvered by a pop star in a bustier. But even that chaos pales compared to what happened when the studio literally turned into a disaster zone. The elephant incident that stunk up Hollywood. Baby elephants look adorable on camera. They're cute, they're entertaining, and they draw huge ratings. What nobody tells you is that when they get nervous, they turn into organic disaster machines. The little elephant's entrance had the audience awing, like it was the cutest thing they'd ever seen. Then the camera lights spooked her. You know what happens when elephants get scared? They don't just run away. They express themselves, loudly and messily. A low rumble, a tail lift, and then a cascade that would make a waterfall jealous hit the studio floor with a splat that echoed through the building. Steam, actual steam, started rising in the spotlights. Johnny gagged, covered his nose, and tried to wave the smell toward Ed McMahon. "Ed ordered takeout," he quipped, but his voice was strained. The stage hands rushed in with buckets, but here's what made everything worse. They slipped. The brown mess spread like lava across the pristine studio floor. Johnny relocated his chair 3 feet upstage and somehow continued the show, making jokes over the stench. The cameras stayed on tight shots, but wide-angle footage later leaked, showing what looked like a brown lake surrounding the guest area. Afterward, Johnny didn't just laugh it off. He was furious. "I like a good story," he told bandleader Doc Severinsen, "but I don't need it steaming under my chair." The changes were immediate. Plastic sheeting for all future large animal segments, doubled hazard pay for janitors, and a 2-year ban on elephant acts. Johnny wasn't taking any more chances with his dignity or his studio. But even elephant excrement was nothing compared to the sweetest guest who nearly gave Johnny a heart attack. The Cookie Lady's heart attack scare. Sometimes the most innocent moments turn into absolute nightmares. Myrtle Young seemed like the perfect Tonight Show guest. A sweet grandmother from St. Louis who collected potato chips shaped like famous people. What could possibly go wrong? Everything. Absolutely everything. Myrtle had brought 2 tins filled with her precious chip portraits. She was proudly showing off one shaped like Abraham Lincoln, another that looked remarkably like a seahorse. Johnny was genuinely delighted. This was exactly the kind of wholesome, quirky content that made The Tonight Show special. That's when his mischievous side took over. While Myrtle turned to face the audience and reached for her next chip, Johnny spotted a regular Ruffles potato chip sitting on the desk. You could practically see the devil on his shoulder, whispering, "Do it." Myrtle spun around, hand flying to her heart. "Oh, mercy," she gasped, thinking Johnny had just eaten Abraham Lincoln. The audience roared with laughter, but something was wrong, terribly wrong. Myrtle's knees buckled. Her face went pale. This wasn't embarrassment. This was medical distress. Johnny's grin vanished instantly. He dropped the chip and grabbed her arm. "Look at this one, Johnny," she said weakly, trying to continue the segment even as her body was failing her. During the commercial break, paramedics rushed onto the set. Johnny spent the entire break apologizing, offering to replace her entire collection, asking if she needed anything: water, a doctor, a trip to the hospital. Myrtle smiled weakly, but couldn't stop trembling. The poor woman had put her heart and soul into that collection, and she thought Johnny had just destroyed her most prized piece as a joke. That night, Johnny personally called her hotel room. Not once, but 3 times, checking on her condition and apologizing profusely. He even offered free tickets for her entire family to come back any time. To head writer Raymond Siller, Johnny was blunt. That landed wrong. Ever scare sweet grandmas again. For weeks afterward, Johnny would replay the footage in his dressing room, wincing every time he saw Myrtle's face. When NBC requested the clip for a blooper reel, Johnny personally refused. The clip appears today only in retrospectives, with Johnny's on-screen comment, "Cruel joke, lesson learned." But if you think making a grandmother fear for her chip collection was heartbreaking, the next guest's arrogance crossed every line of professional respect. The Chevy Chase disaster that ended a career. Chevy Chase walked onto the Tonight Show stage in 1978 like he still owned Saturday Night Live. The problem? He'd left SNL 2 years earlier, and success had gone to his head in the worst possible way. He didn't just sit down for the interview. He slapped Johnny's desk and shouted, "How you doing, America?" like he was the host. Then he answered Johnny's first question with a 3-minute monologue about his own greatness. Johnny tried to redirect. "Chevy, the film's about..." Chase steamrolled right over him. He mocked Johnny's tie, mugged for the cameras, and demanded bigger applause from the audience. This wasn't just rude, it was professional assault. Here's how you knew Johnny was getting furious. The pencil. When Johnny was mildly annoyed, he'd tap it slowly. When he was really angry, those taps became a machine gun rhythm. Tonight, it sounded like a drum solo from hell. But Chase was too full of himself to notice. He kept going, getting more obnoxious by the minute. Then he made the fatal mistake. He slapped Johnny's shoulder, hard. The studio went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Johnny's voice, when it came, was ice cold. "Touch me again, and you'll be hosting alone." The audience laughed nervously, thinking it was part of the bit. It wasn't. This was Johnny Carson drawing a line in the sand, and Chevy had just stepped over it. Chase finally sat back, but the damage was done. In the green room afterward, Johnny skipped his usual polite thank you. Instead, he asked the talent coordinator, "Did he rehearse?" "No," came the answer. "Then book him on any show that doesn't tape here." For decades, literally decades, Chevy Chase's name was nowhere to be found on the Tonight Show guest list. When reporters asked Johnny years later why Chase never returned, he paused and said, "I like guests who share the ball, not steal it." Viewers never saw Chase on Johnny's couch again. The lesson was clear. Suggest you could replace Johnny Carson, and you'd be replaced yourself. What do you think? Was Johnny too harsh, or did Chevy deserve the permanent ban? Let me know in the comments, because the next disaster showed us what happens when celebrities completely lose control on live television. The Farrah Fawcett meltdown that shocked America. Farrah Fawcett walked onto the Tonight Show stage in a silver jumpsuit, hair like a shampoo commercial, and eyes that darted nervously across the studio lights. Publicly, she was America's sweetheart. Privately, friends said she'd barely slept after red-eye flights and endless press junkets. Johnny asked about her new film, Saturn III. Farrah giggled and called it Saturday 3, then launched into a rambling story about roller skating in Malibu. Johnny's smile tightened. His pencil taps quickened. She started talking about surfing, then glanced at the band and said, "The trumpets have pretty colors." Coughs echoed through the studio. Farrah leaned forward and whispered, "Sometimes I dream I'm a dolphin." Johnny raised an eyebrow and replied gently, "And do you wake up wet?" It earned nervous laughs, but it didn't slow the spiral. Off camera during the commercial, Johnny hissed to producer Fred de Cordova. "Help me," Fred suggested, cutting the segment short. NBC's control room refused. Ratings gold. Johnny sighed, straightened his tie, and faced the cameras again. Farrah picked invisible lint from his lapel, interrupted herself mid-sentence, and openly admired the boom microphone. "It's like a huge lollipop." Johnny, ever the professional lifeguard, wrapped it quickly. "Farrah Fawcett, folks. The movie opens Friday. Wear your seatbelts." He slammed his dressing room door afterward, and told his staff never to book a guest coming in hot. The press speculated she was intoxicated. Her agent blamed migraine medication. Johnny publicly wished her well, but privately instituted the Farrah Protocol, mandatory rest, rehearsals, and a ban on energy drinks before airtime. Late-night hosts still cite Farrah's visit as a masterclass in how not to do television. Clips rack up millions of views on YouTube under titles like Car Crash TV. For Johnny, it remained Exhibit A of how a single guest could turn his controlled kingdom into chaos. But even celebrity meltdowns couldn't prepare Johnny for the most devastating betrayal of his entire career. This next story broke his heart completely and changed everything. The Joan Rivers betrayal that shattered a friendship. This one still makes me angry, and it happened almost 40 years ago. Joan Rivers wasn't just Johnny's frequent guest host, she was family. What made the betrayal even more devastating was that Carson, who had lost his middle son Rick to a tragic accident after battling mental health struggles, had found in Joan the daughter he never had. Johnny had coached Joan's timing, shared his secret notes that no other comic ever saw, treated her like his protege. When Joan killed on Monday nights, Johnny beamed with pride, like a father watching his daughter graduate. Then came October 3rd, 1986. The night everything changed forever. Joan and her husband Edgar quietly flew to Los Angeles, met Fox executives at a hotel by LAX, and signed a contract for a brand new show. Not just any show, one that would air in the exact same time slot as The Tonight Show. This wasn't just changing jobs. This was declaring war. Fox sweetened the deal with total creative control, something NBC had never offered Joan. She loved the freedom, but she dreaded telling Johnny. She called NBC, learned he was taping, and told herself, "I'll explain tomorrow." Variety broke the story that afternoon. During rehearsal, Ed McMahon handed Johnny the hot-off-the-press paper. Johnny read the headline, "Rivers Defects to Fox," and went white as a sheet. The betrayal cut deeper because Carson's own childhood had been marked by abandonment. His father rarely spoke to him, and his mother Ruth was cold and critical, teaching Johnny early that those closest to you could inflict the deepest wounds. He slammed his pencil so hard, it snapped in half. The crew froze. Johnny walked off set, shut his dressing room door, and lit a cigarette, something he rarely did before taping. That night, he performed the show on autopilot, skipping every Joan Rivers joke that was written in his cue cards. Joan claimed she called Johnny's direct line 4 times. His assistant Helen Sanders said no such calls came in. Johnny later told friends, "If she called, she had my home number, my office number, and the private line on the stage wall." All 3 stayed silent. The next morning, Carson called NBC's West Coast president with a simple order. Pull every clip, every Joan Rivers montage, every anniversary special mention, every Monday night rerun, gone. A red stamp reading "Rivers Off Limits" went on her file. Fox launched The Late Show starring Joan Rivers. Its debut actually outrated The Tonight Show by half a rating point. Johnny said nothing on air, but in that night's monologue, he slipped in, "Remember, folks, loyalty is a boomerang. You throw it out, it comes right back, unless you drop it." The crowd laughed. Industry insiders felt the blade. Johnny told writer Ray Siller, "She was my successor in spirit, and she sold that for a neon backdrop." He actually shredded old memos containing her jokes, an unheard-of ritual for the famously archival host. What Johnny didn't know was that Joan's husband Edgar was spiraling into severe depression following a heart attack in 1984. And the Fox deal represented their desperate attempt to secure financial stability before Edgar's deteriorating mental health made him unemployable. Joan tried for years to apologize. She sent letters, Christmas baskets, even a painting of his beloved Nebraska farmhouse. Every gift came back marked, "Return to sender." The tragedy deepened when Edgar Rosenberg took his own life in 1987, leaving behind cassette tapes for Joan and their daughter Melissa, explaining that his failing health made him feel like a burden to those he loved. Carson passed away in 2005, still refusing to speak her name. When Joan finally sat on the Tonight couch in 2014 with Jimmy Fallon, she patted the armrest and whispered, "Miss you, Johnny." Viewers felt the echo of a friendship that burned brighter and ended colder than any in late-night history. Think chaotic moments and heartbreaking betrayals were the worst of it? Think again. Sometimes the tension escalated beyond awkward silence into something far more dangerous, genuine confrontations that threatened to explode on live television. When Johnny's legendary composure completely shattered, what you're about to witness are the moments when Johnny Carson's famous control didn't just crack, it exploded into pieces. These weren't just uncomfortable interviews. These were nuclear meltdowns that changed careers and rewrote the rules of late-night television. Charles Grodin, the confrontation that crossed every line. Out of all Johnny Carson's sparring partners, none delivered a more disrespectful performance than Charles Grodin. The deadpan actor had perfected an art form that walked the razor's edge between comedy and genuine hostility. His appearances were legendary for their awkward tension. But his 1982 visit crossed from playful confrontation into something that genuinely rattled Carson. The trouble started when Grodin arrived to promote his book, immediately complaining about NBC's treatment of authors. While most guests gratefully accepted their promotional opportunity, Grodin launched into an on-air attack targeting Johnny's opinion that his book was overpriced.
Your attitude would be disdain. You know, when I tried to talk about my book in the hardcover, you said $18.95, that's a lot of money for a book.
I thought
said,
it was.
It's my whole life.
I thought it was.
You said, maybe if it's Mother Teresa's life.
You remember those things, don't you?
Yes, I do.
I didn't know you were that sensitive. You actually remember that.
I'm so sensitive, I really can't answer a question from someone who's not interested in the question.
I'm very interested in the question. All right, it's okay, I'm used to it.
The audience laughed, assuming this was typical Grodin performance art. But Carson's expression tightened when Grodin mocked his voice, adopting an exaggerated impression that made the host sound robotic and disinterested.
Are you whispering again?
I know, you said I'm whispering last time.
You talk very softly for me. I don't know why.
Are you hearing
This is
me
what you
right
sound like.
Okay.
You're talking to me the book.
Have you seen those little whisper things that people get who are just on the edge of going completely deaf, where you hear something? I'm going to get
You
you
think
one
it's
of those.
me?
Yeah, I think you're losing it.
Well, maybe it is me. Now you want to know why I mistreat you.
That's right. Now people don't understand when you come out here.
Well, but look at you. I mean, you don't really care what I have to say, do you? Honestly?
No.
That was the moment Carson's famous composure cracked completely. His smile vanished, replaced by a cold stare that regular viewers had never seen before. "You know what, Charles?" Carson snapped back, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. "What do you care about? I mean, in life, you care about anything that you actually care about? My health. Then I have this terrible pain right now that's aggravated by you asking me dumb questions like that." The argument escalated from there, with Grodin questioning Johnny's integrity, and Johnny firing back with barely controlled fury. It ended with an uncomfortable handshake and forced laughter, but the damage was done. Grodin's future appearances were noticeably fewer and more carefully managed. Carson had made it clear that while he enjoyed verbal sparring, there were boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. But even that heated confrontation couldn't compare to the night Johnny's own best friend turned against him. Ed McMahon, the shark debate that broke a friendship. Perhaps the most shocking argument in Tonight Show history involved Carson's most trusted colleague and closest friend. What made this argument particularly heartbreaking was that it occurred during a period when Carson was still grieving a family tragedy, and Carson's emotional walls were higher than ever. In 1983, a seemingly innocent discussion about marine life escalated into a genuine confrontation that shocked both the studio audience and home viewers. Ed's unusual assertiveness that night may have been fueled by his own personal struggles. He was quietly battling financial problems and drinking issues that he kept hidden from Johnny, creating tension in their relationship that neither man acknowledged publicly. The argument began during Carson's monologue when he made a joke about beach safety and shark attacks. McMahon, perhaps emboldened by alcohol or simply feeling contrary, interrupted with a correction that caught Carson completely off guard.
Well, does the shark continually swim? It never stops swimming. The shark never stops swimming. All its life.
What does that got to do with my
Well, I mean,
speech?
this you say for the first 3 years. This is all its life. It never stops swimming.
But this bird is in the air.
This shark is in the water. Be silly to see a shark flying around.
Wait a minute, I fail to see the logic of this.
McMahon, clearly stung, fired back. "And my job for 30 years has been to make you look good, Johnny. Sometimes that means speaking up when you're about to make yourself look foolish." The statement hung in the air like a live wire. The words cut especially deep because they reminded Carson of painful family conversations where he had been too focused on his public image to be present for those who needed him most. Carson stared at McMahon for what felt like an eternity, then simply said, "We'll be right back after these messages." During the commercial break, the two men had a whispered but heated exchange that crew members described as the most intense moment they'd ever witnessed between the longtime partners. When they returned from the commercial, both men were professional, but noticeably cooler toward each other. The easy chemistry that had defined their partnership for decades was strained for weeks afterward, but even those explosive confrontations pale in comparison to what happened when someone threatened Johnny Carson physically. Wayne Newton, The backstage confrontation that changed everything. The most explosive argument in Tonight Show history never made it to air, but its aftermath defined Johnny's approach to troublesome guests for the rest of his career. Newton's confrontation with Carson came at a particularly vulnerable time. Wayne had been receiving legitimate threats from organized crime figures in Las Vegas, and the stress of fearing for his family's safety had pushed him to a breaking point. Wayne Newton had been a frequent target of Carson's monologue jokes, particularly regarding his Las Vegas image and carefully maintained appearance. The jokes were harmless by Tonight Show standards, but they were accumulating into a problem for Newton's business. The confrontation happened in 1980 when Newton arrived unannounced at NBC's Burbank studios during a taping day. What made Newton's desperation even more tragic was that he had turned to alleged mobster Guido Penosi for protection after receiving threats against his family, including his young daughter, making him vulnerable to exactly the kind of organized crime connections that Carson's jokes implied. Security footage showed Newton striding down the hallway with obvious determination, his face red with anger. He bypassed the normal guest check-in procedures and stormed straight into Carson's office. "Mr. Carson, these jokes about me will stop, and they'll stop now, or I will kick your rear end." It's unclear whether Newton actually made physical contact. His story changes in different interviews, but the threat was clear and unambiguous. Carson, who had built his reputation on fearless comedy and never backing down from a joke, found himself in uncharted territory. He had dealt with upset guests before, but never with someone who had crossed the line from complaint to intimidation. The immediate aftermath was swift and decisive. Carson contacted NBC security and issued a permanent ban on Newton from the Tonight Show premises. Every reference to Newton was scrubbed from that night's monologue and future scripts. It wasn't fear that drove Carson's decision, it was principle. Anyone who resorted to intimidation rather than professional discussion had forfeited their place on the Tonight Show. The ban held for the remainder of Carson's tenure, sending a clear message throughout Hollywood. Jokes were fair game, but threats were not. And Wayne Newton wasn't the only guest to cross unforgivable lines. Johnny's zero-tolerance policy created a permanent blacklist that shocked Hollywood. The guests banned forever. Sometimes the chaos wasn't just embarrassing or uncomfortable. It was so severe that it ended careers permanently. What you're about to discover are the remaining guests who crossed lines so unforgivable that Johnny Carson banned them from his show forever. The Uri Geller debunking that got him banned for fraud. Carson's childhood magic tricks made him despise anyone claiming genuine supernatural abilities. When spoon-bending psychic Uri Geller scheduled an appearance in 1973, Carson contacted renowned skeptic James Randi to orchestrate an elaborate test. Randi provided untouched items, sealed film containers, restaurant-grade silverware, and a marble compass. Prop master Bobby Quinn secured everything until showtime. Carson began with playful anticipation. "Tonight, we'll bend some minds, maybe even some metal." Geller entered radiating confidence, perfectly groomed. Carson requested he identify concealed drawings in sealed envelopes. Geller pressed papers against his forehead, eyes shut, clearly struggling. "I feel drained," he mumbled weakly. Audience enthusiasm faded. Carson waited patiently, then presented the spoon. Nothing happened. Geller blamed studio conditions, hostile energy, even lunar phases. Carson remained courteous while delivering gentle barbs. "We'll give you as much time as you need in the next life." The audience erupted. Geller's face turned crimson. Post-show, Carson made his verdict. No return invitation would ever be issued. "We exposed him as a fraud on national television," Carson informed producers. "I won't provide another platform for deception." Thousands of letters poured in afterward, half praising Johnny for the debunking, half calling him a bully. Ironically, Geller's bookings doubled. Proof, he claimed, that NBC had sabotaged him with negative energy. Johnny fumed. "We exposed him and made him richer." Great. But he also added a new page to the guest handbook. Any paranormal demonstration must use props supplied by The Tonight Show. Magicians loved it. So-called psychics avoided the studio for years. Decades later, documentaries still replay the meltdown as the night network TV challenged the supernatural. Geller still insists he bent a key backstage. Johnny's memory can't contradict him anymore, but fans figure it would, if it could. Bob Hope, banned for scripted rigidity. Hope's team delivered thick packets beforehand, prepared jokes, suggested questioning strategies, product endorsements, even preferred camera angles. For Carson, whose brilliance emerged from improvised responses, this felt like receiving sheet music at a jazz session. During filming, Hope barely acknowledged Johnny. He focused on cue cards, positioned near camera lenses, awaiting Carson's setup for predetermined punchlines. The breaking point arrived during a 1978 visit, featuring 3 sponsor mentions within 7 minutes. Carson said, "The sponsor receives more screen time than I do," but afterward delivered an ultimatum to producers. "I won't conduct infomercials disguised as interviews." He's not performing television, Carson argued. He's reciting commercials with canned laughter. The network initially objected, but Carson threatened departure if forced to endure more scripted discussions. Hope received no official notification, just gradually absent booking opportunities that extended indefinitely. Charlton Heston, banned for monopolizing airtime. Heston treated interviews like congressional hearings. Carson might ask, "Chuck, any injuries during those chariot sequences?" Heston would lean back, reminiscing about childhood ranching, Yale theatrical training, and artistic risk philosophy, arriving at the broken rib story 5 minutes later. During commercial breaks, Heston provided additional commentary through off-air footnotes. He cited Greek tragedies, quoted Plutarch, and encouraged Johnny to explore historical museums. Carson favored rapid question-answer exchanges. Heston delivered lectures that destroyed momentum. Carson's patience finally broke during a movie discussion where Heston launched into a 15-minute freedom dissertation. "He's operating his own program within my program," Carson complained afterward, "and it's not entertaining." The ban was immediate and decisive. "He's a magnificent actor and likely a decent person," Carson told his booking representative, "but he treats every question like his cue for the Gettysburg Address." Don Rickles, banned for destructive behavior. Don Rickles' machine gun insults thrilled viewers, but the mayhem he left behind eventually cost him a permanent spot. The fatal crack appeared in 1976 when Rickles was guest hosting during Carson's vacation. He grabbed Johnny's treasured walnut cigarette box, a gift from a stagehand who'd once saved Carson from a studio fire, and accidentally smashed the lid while performing. "Oh, I broke Carson's cigarette box." The next night, Carson returned, discovered the splintered keepsake, and turned annoyance into live comedy. He marched onto the adjacent CPO Sharky set, cameras in tow, barking, "You broke my box." Off camera, however, Carson took inventory. Rickles ignored timing lights, derailed segments, demolished props, and pushed jokes the censors had rejected. The broken box became shorthand for a larger headache. A final straw arrived in 1985 when Rickles ridiculed an overweight woman in the front row, triggering a wave of complaint letters. "Hilarious, yes, but it's radioactive too," Carson told his producers. Quietly, he issued a lifetime ban. Fred Rogers, banned for pacing problems. Fred Rogers appeared guaranteed to warm hearts until it became a ratings catastrophe that convinced Carson some personalities were incompatible with late-night television. Rogers' entrance immediately revealed the tempo mismatch. He paused center stage, offered a modest wave, and spoke in his characteristic gentle rhythm. "Thank you very much, friends. I'm very glad to be here." The applause continued because the floor crew couldn't determine if he'd completed his greeting. Carson attempted an icebreaker. "Fred, I wore my sneakers in your honor," raising a polished loafer to reveal bright white tennis shoes. Rogers smiled gently and responded, "That's very thoughtful, Johnny. Sneakers can help us feel ready to play." Every planned comedic beat shifted 30 seconds behind schedule. Rogers delivered patient, measured responses with 2-second pauses between thoughts. Perfect for preschoolers. Devastating for 11:45 p.m. programming. Post-broadcast analysis was devastating. Minute-by-minute Nielsen data revealed a 3-point audience decline during Rogers' segment. Carson decided that evening, Fred Rogers embodies sainthood, but saints don't succeed in late night. The ban wasn't personal. It was professional preservation. "Some individuals are too virtuous for this industry," Carson explained to staff, "and this industry moves too quickly for them." The hidden truth behind the chaos. 7 troublemakers, 7 permanent banishments. Geller's deception, Chase's hubris, Hope's scripts, Newton's intimidation, Rogers' pacing, Heston's monologues, Rickles' destruction, all violated boundaries Carson wouldn't tolerate. These weren't simple personality clashes. They were calculated business decisions protecting the show's quality and Carson's sanity. The bands transmitted a clear message throughout Hollywood. The Tonight Show maintained standards, and violating them meant permanent exile from television's most prestigious stage. Carson's legendary composure was hard-won. As a child in Nebraska during the Depression, he learned early that showing emotion was dangerous in a household where his father Kit was emotionally absent and his mother Ruth was harshly critical, shaping Johnny into a man who kept his feelings locked away. Each argument exposed the deep vulnerabilities Carson carried. His childhood wounds from an emotionally absent father, the guilt he felt over family tragedies, and his desperate need for the few genuine relationships in his guarded life. But they also revealed a deeply wounded individual who had learned early in life that emotional walls were necessary for survival, even if they sometimes isolated him from the very people who cared about him most. From rogue elephants to career-ending betrayals, from heated arguments to lifetime bans, Johnny survived it all with a joke, proving why he stayed king of late night for 30 remarkable years. That represents the hidden art of hosting, recognizing when entertainment becomes destruction and possessing the strength to declare never again. Johnny Carson deserved better than the chaos these guests put him through, and the best way to honor his legacy is to make sure these incredible stories are never forgotten. By subscribing, you're joining a community that refuses to let television history disappear. We're going to keep telling these stories, keep exposing the truth behind the glamour, and keep the memory of late night's greatest host alive. Hit subscribe if you believe Johnny Carson's 30-year reign deserves to be remembered for both its brilliance and its battles.